Welcome to this tutorial on analyzing an attribute agreement analysis. If you're looking to set up an attribute agreement analysis, please see our previous video. We will analyze it in this one. This is done in Minitab. That's the software we'll be using today. An attribute agreement analysis is part of a suite of tools used for a really important purpose. When you have multiple people making measurements, you want to ensure that everyone measuring is doing it the same way every time. If you were working in a manufacturing plant and you were making a certain part, you might have a QC department of, say, 10 different people. And you want to make sure that whoever that part went to in the department, they would measure it the same way as everyone else every time. If you are not working on a part, you might use an attribute agreement analysis. For numeric data, such as measuring a part and getting a number, like 5.2 inches, you would use a gauge R&R. For non-numeric data, you use the attribute agreement analysis. In the situation we've set up here, we are not doing a physical measurement. This situation has folks applying for a leveled credential, and through a series of reviewing the application, maybe using an SOP or some kind of guidance or standardized approach, the reviewer determines what level the applicant should have, and they assign it level 0 through level 6. You see that here in L0 through L6 in columns C4 and C5. Your applicants would be here under samples in column C2. You can see that there are 10 applicants or 10 samples. And while I just have them numbered 1 through 10, in your setup you could have given them a variety of designations. You could have given the name of the applicant or the application number. It's really up to you when you set that up. The appraisers, it's the same thing. But in this instance, I chose to give the appraiser's name. And I will almost always choose to do this in the field because it allows ease of review. Attribute agreement analysis are extremely helpful for training purposes. So if I went through this, when I go through the results, I might see that Miss Marple here needs a lot more training because she was way off in her answers. Well, perhaps Mr. Holmes here had everything correct. So it's easiest for me when I'm working in the field to put the actual name of the appraisers so that I don't have to consult a key or an index to figure out who did what. The standards would be the correct answers. So once correct answers are determined, you can put that in when you set it up, as you saw in the last video. And the assessments are the answers of the appraisers or reviewers. All right, so you can see here just right off the bat, Poirot has all of his assessments the same as all of the standards. And this is dummy data. All right, so I just made this up for the purpose of this review. And I went and intentionally made several things that we'll see when we come to determining what that means, but that will be in the next video where we will determine what the output means in regard to what's called inter-rater reliability. So your appraisers you can also consider raters, and you want to make sure that they match not only themselves but each other. So for that, we also set this up to have 2 replicates. So you can see at the top under method, this is telling you how you set up your analysis. And so you'll see here Marple has a randomized order of samples starting in row 11, and her replicate will be down here, starting in row 111. And it's going to be re-randomized, so she will do it in a different order. All right. It's fairly straightforward to do the analysis. It's most important to understand what you're analyzing. But once you have it all set up, like I have here, in order to save time, I went ahead and filled that all out for us. All you do is go to Stat, Quality Tools. Last time we did Create Attribute Agreement Analysis Worksheet. This time to analyze it, we just click Attribute Agreement Analysis. Now, it wants to know a little bit of information. If you're bringing in an attribute agreement analysis from somewhere else, some other spreadsheet, some setup, you basically have to tell it what you set up. In this instance, this is the default Minitab setting, so it should be fairly straightforward. Let's start in reverse. Your appraisers column is simply appraisers. Your samples column is simply samples. While it says attribute column, that's going to correspond to your assessment. I don't know why in that case it called it a different thing, but it does. Now you don't always have to have a known standard. You can do this a few different ways. You can just see what the agreement is. Maybe you don't know what the standard is, but you just want to see if everyone's doing it the same. So you'd leave that out. In this case, we want to know if they're doing it the same and if they're getting the correct answers. So we do have standards, and that is in the standards column. All right, you can click in information, and that's if you wanted to add anything into the date of your study. Let's say January 24th, 2024, reported by Grace Sigma. Product name, we'll say application review. And that's just going to label your data so when you refer back to it in the future, you can see more easily what it is. If you want to calculate either of these statistics, let's go ahead and do both of them. We want a confidence level of 95. That's typical. Minitab will generally populate things with the typical numbers, and if you wanted to try something else, you can enter that manually. The graphs, I typically take all of the graphs. I'm a big fan of graphs. And the results. All right, that's fine. I often like Minitab's default settings. Okay. Okay. Minitab's going to think about it for a minute. And then you can see over here it generated a new line. So it generated the worksheet, and then every time you do a procedure, it's going to generate a new line, and it's going to give you this readout. Okay. Now in the next video, we will go through what all of these different things mean, but just a high overview. It's going to give you within appraisers. So here's all the information you put at the top, the gauge information. Within appraisers, we'll scroll down, your statistics you requested, and then each appraiser versus the standard. So perhaps Poirot and Dupin matched completely, but they didn't match the standard. I mean, in this case they did. I set it up that way. But it's possible that two people could match each other, but not match the standard. All right. So like I said, oh, and here's between appraisers. Inspected 10, matched 0. All right, and so for the next, oh, and here's your two graphs. Excuse me, within appraisers and appraiser versus standard. In our next video, we'll look at more closely how we should interpret some of this data and what we might do with it. If you have any other suggestions or requests of Minitab demos or other process engineering techniques you'd like to see, feel free to put those down in the comments, and we will definitely work towards that. Thank you.